Hey, what's good, everyone? It's Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com coming to you from beautiful Tuscaloosa, Alabama on Friday, November 13th. Now, a report by ESPN says that the college football playoff delay is being discussed currently. Now, Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlesby said that they're looking at all situations and potentially of moving back the college football playoffs, which was scheduled to be at the start of the 2021 season, right? Those first, a couple weeks in January is when the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl would be. Now, how does this impact Alabama? Now, it's hard to say because this is all hypothetical, but let's face it. I mean, the way that Alabama is playing right now, looks like they have a shot not only to play in the SEC championship, but also be one of the teams, the top 4 teams to make the college football playoffs. Now, this is from an article written on ESPN. I'm on the College Football Operations Committee, and we spent some time talking about that. Bob Bowlesby told ESPN, "We have not come to any closure on it, but there is some latitude to postpone the college football playoffs if that needs to be addressed. The same is true with the college football New Year's 6, he added. I don't know if we'll see us playing a championship game in February, but you never know. These are unusual times, and things that might not be otherwise be acceptable have to be considered in this kind of circumstance." Again, full article on ESPN. I think when you look at this entire year, I mean, who would have thought that we would be at this point? I did, because at the beginning of the season, I knew that Alabama, at least the SEC, was going to play come hell or high water. Absolutely. I like the approach by the SEC, holding off and not postponing the season like the Big Ten, right? We saw the Big Ten kind of flip and flop. I'm glad they're playing. But the point is, I think the SEC, and I know a lot of people don't agree with, the way that Greg Sankey runs the SEC. I like the way that the SEC approached the beginning of the season. And I knew that Alabama and the rest of the SEC teams would play. I just always felt that getting to this point of the season would be very difficult to navigate through because you continue to see a climb in COVID-19. You combine that with the flu season that comes at the end of November, December, January. And then you have all these teams continuing to be on the move. I mean, think about this. Who would have thought today, going into a pivotal week of the college football season, that you would not have Alabama playing, you would not have Ohio State playing, and that you would not have Clemson playing? All right, so Alabama, of course, being postponed. Ohio State, that game against Maryland is canceled, just straight up canceled. They're not even going to try to reschedule that game because they can't, scheduling wise. That's on the Big Ten. They didn't allow for added weeks like the SEC. Clemson, they're on an open week after falling to Notre Dame in double overtime. You have Texas A&M, their game was postponed. Georgia, their game was postponed. Basically, all the marquee games across the SEC were postponed other than Florida and Arkansas. So, are these games going to be postponed? Are they going to just be, rescheduled? That's something that everybody is looking at. I think from hearing Greg Sankey speak just recently during a teleconference, he wants to play these games. He wants to somehow navigate through this, which, again, I got to give him credit for, right? We just can't cancel everything because obstacles come in the way. I mean, that's just not how life works. We have to navigate through them. You also saw that the SEC came out with tie-breaking protocols, which I like, right? I mean, because you have Texas A&M who continues to roll. Their only loss being to Alabama, both those teams being in the West. I already read kind of how the tiebreakers work on one of my other shows, but basically it comes down to winning percentage and then head-to-head. And the fact that Alabama has to play 7 games. That's kind of the magic number. So if we can get Alabama to play whoever they're going to play, then Alabama would qualify for the SEC West, granted that they do continue to win. Right? Now, it's all hypothetical because, number one, we have to get to the next game. And currently the next game is against Kentucky, or at least that's how it reads. But there's several different scenarios that are being kicked around back and forth. And one is kind of rescheduling this LSU game for this next weekend. Now, how could that even be possible, right? I mean, you would have to, really shift things around. And that's something that the SEC is going to have to figure out like very soon, as in today, right? Because these are the two scenarios that I think that USA Today was reporting that could happen. Now, this is not final, but these are just scheduling scenarios, let's call them. And I already read this, but I'll do it again for people who missed it. Now, scenario A would be that Alabama and LSU is scheduled for November 21st. And then Alabama will play Auburn on the 28th as scheduled. Alabama and Arkansas would now take place on December 5th. And Alabama versus Kentucky, that would be December 12th because Kentucky has an open week. The second scenario, Alabama versus Kentucky on December 21st as scheduled. That would be this next weekend. Then Alabama versus Auburn as scheduled. Alabama at LSU on December 5th. That would be the rescheduling of that game. And Alabama at Arkansas on December 12th. So that kind of makes sense because, Alabama, would still get their 10 games in. Granted, they can play. Now, there's, of course, obstacles that could potentially come into the way of any of these games. But I like scenario B because that gives Alabama the opportunity to play their 10-game schedule. And they can earn their way to the SEC West without having to go to the tie-breaking scenario, right? Just win out. Or even if Alabama was to drop a game, they still have that head-to-head against Texas A&M. Okay, so those are the scenarios right now being kicked around by the USA Today. Now, none of that is official, and right now we're just kind of going into this as Alabama is going to play Kentucky on this next weekend. I'd be curious to see what Alabama is doing, and as you saw, Alabama just continues to practice. I mean, that's all they really can do. Because in this situation, all you can do is really focus on what you were doing at practice, continuing to get better. Because if we've learned anything during the 2020 season is that you can't control one single thing. And especially, and that must be tough for a guy like Nick Saban because he's all about rhythm. He's all about routine. And this year has been nothing close to routine, right? Now, as we kind of look down the stretch at potential pitfalls for the Alabama Crimson Tide, sure, having Kentucky, Arkansas, and Auburn still left on the schedule, Alabama could, lose one of those trap games. Who knows what type of magic Gus Malzahn has in store for Nick Saban. He's kind of been the one coach that can provide that kryptonite to beat Nick Saban head-to-head. But I think the real pitfall could be COVID-19, right? Even if you look to Alabama potentially playing in the SEC West Championship, which they have a high percentage of doing, I'm just throwing this out there that Alabama so far has been able to dodge and weave COVID-19, right? You haven't seen a lot of cases. Even Nick Saban just came out this week and said that Alabama only had one positive test. And this was after, everybody went home for that Halloween break or following the Halloween break. But my point is, what if Alabama is to catch a bad case of COVID-19 or if some marquee starters are to miss a critical game like Auburn, a critical game in the SEC championship against Florida? That's one thing that I could see coming into play. Or, even during the playoffs, right? Because it seems like almost guys who have already received or had COVID-19, those guys are almost cleared to play for the remainder of the season. Look at a player like for the example of that would be Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, right? He had to sit those 2 games. One of them, obviously, Clemson lost to Notre Dame, game that he didn't play in, but he's going to play the remainder of these games, which I think is a benefit for Clemson going forward because now he's not going to have to sit that game. Yes, I've read that COVID-19 can come back and impact you a second round, but it seems like those chances are small. That's just how I'm looking at kind of the overall spectrum from what could happen with Alabama going down the back end. Overall, this team has done fantastic in a year of uncertainty. Nick Saban has continued to be a coach that can have his players dialed in, can have his players performing at the highest level in the most challenging times that we've faced. This has been a very difficult year for everybody. I get it. And Nick Saban's been able to continue to lead this team down the right path, been able to have this team perform at the highest level, have this team continue to improve weekly. Think about the trajectory, talent-wise, and on-the-field play for Alabama. If you're looking at a graph, it's completely going up. It's not going up and down. You're not seeing that inconsistency. You're seeing this team continue to get better every single week. And that's all credit to Nick Saban and the coaching staff. I think certainly, without a doubt, that coaching continuity has a lot to do with that, because these coaches have been together for 2-3 years. And that's something that Nick Saban hasn't had in quite some time. You look at Steve Sarkisian. You look at the defensive coaches. All those guys have been together in the same room. They know what's going on. It also points to leadership. This team has very good leadership. Starts at the top. On the offensive side of the ball, you have guys like Landon Dickerson, Mac Jones. Those are your team leaders. Devontae Smith, guys that have been there, performed at the highest level. On the defensive side, Dylan Moses. Everybody continues to point to him as that alpha on defense. Patrick Surtain. Those are guys that are going to play on Sundays. Those are the guys that are leading this team. As we look at the college football schedule for this coming weekend, you got number 7, Cincinnati, who is 6-0 on the season, taking on East Carolina. Cincinnati favored by nearly 28 points in that game. You have number 9, Miami, taking on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech actually the favorite by 2 points. If you're a betting man, you might want to check up on that. But of course, everybody knows that Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, they go hard. Love how they come out with Enter Sandman. You ever seen that? If not, check it out. Big Ten action. Indiana, number 10 in the country, only played 3 games, taking on Michigan State. Mel Tucker, just a couple weeks ago, beat Michigan. Can he upset the Hoosiers? Indiana favored by 7. Middle Tennessee, taking on number 16, Marshall, the Thundering Herd, 6-0 on the season. Marshall, a 24-point favorite. Western Carolina, taking on Liberty. Western Carolina hasn't played a game this season. Liberty has played 7. Liberty and Hugh Freeze, 7-0 on the season. Not even a line on that game. South Alabama, 3-4, taking on number 25, Louisiana. Billy Napier has the Raging Cajuns rolling. Louisiana is a 15.5-point favorite. You got Notre Dame at number 2 in the country, taking on Boston College. That's a mild rivalry game. Notre Dame, a 13.5-point favorite. You also got USC, talking some Pac-12 football, taking on Arizona. USC 1-0 on the season. Trojans favored by 14 points. SEC action, one of the few games that is taking place. Florida taking on Arkansas. Florida, a 17.5-point favorite. Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts, one of the most dynamic duos in the entire country. Over/under in that game, 60 points. Oregon taking on Washington State. A lot of people talking about Oregon, feeling like that could be that team from the West to make a run. Oregon favored by 10 points in that game. Couple more to get through. SMU, number 19 in the country, 7-1 record, taking on Tulsa, 3-1. Tulsa is actually favored by 2.5 in that game. Wisconsin, number 13 in the country, taking on Michigan. Wisconsin is a 4.5-point favorite. The trajectory of Michigan continues to go downward. Definitely need to beat somebody sometime soon. Beating Michigan would be a big, I guess, midseason relief for Jim Harbaugh and crew. Northwestern, number 23 in the country, taking on Purdue, who is 2-0. Northwestern favored by 2.5. Games that are postponed. This is sad, fans. Alabama and LSU. Ohio State and Maryland. My goodness, I was looking forward to seeing Justin Fields versus Talia Tagovailoa, weren't you? Other games that are postponed, Texas A&M and Tennessee. Jimbo Fisher versus Jeremy Pruitt. We're not going to get to see that one just yet. Georgia and Missouri. And another game that was postponed, Coastal Carolina. Did you know that they were number 15 in the country? I didn't. 7-0 on the season. Also postponed in the SEC, Auburn, and Mississippi State. Yeah, a lot of games postponed. So I guess all eyes will be on Notre Dame taking on Boston College, and then also Florida taking on Arkansas, an improved Arkansas team. So, that'll have to get us through this season. And then, of course, we'll be watching Bama in the NFL. Bama in the NFL needs its own just channel, right? We got Red Zone at my house, but you need just Bama in the NFL. I mean, let's face it. the NFL is built by Bama, is built by Nick Saban. Hey, friends, thank you very much for listening to my program today. I appreciate it. Be sure and hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We appreciate you guys being a part of our channel right here on YouTube. Tell your friends about our channel, and remember that you can get all our content also wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, wherever that is. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend. We'll be around. We'll have more content coming your way right here on BamaInsider.com. Coming to you from beautiful Tuscaloosa, Alabama, this is Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com.